Thank you for joining us today for the launch of Leading Transformative Change Collectively, a practitioner guide to realizing the SDGs. I'm Douglas Williamson, one of the co-authors and a managing partner of the Collective Leadership Institute. I'm joined today by my fellow partners and co-authors, Dr. Petra Kuenkel, Dominic Stucker, and Elizabeth Kuhn, as well as by many CLI team members. This book is a culmination of many years of work and practice in collective leadership and transformative change processes, although it's only a stepping stone in the larger process of the 2030 Agenda, an even longer process of achieving sustainable development, justice, equity, socio-ecological flourishing, and peace. As co-authors, we're grateful to all our colleagues and the hundreds of practitioners with whom we've worked around the world who have enriched this book. Why is this book important now? As the world has fitfully addressed the challenges laid out in the 2030 Agenda through its Sustainable Development Goals, it is ever more clear that the means of implementation for achieving these goals is a vital, if not the vital factor in collectively guiding societies around the world towards greater sustainability. Many of the systems that we have created to govern ourselves and manage our resources are no longer in service to the flourishing of societies and the larger community of life. When we speak of systems in this book, we are mostly referring to people and their institutions and the many forms of interaction they have created to address issues of common concern. Within the SDG framework, this is addressed in the 17th and final goal on partnerships, in which multi-stakeholder partnerships are promoted as a means for addressing the other 16 goals, which include more specific issues such as poverty, education, and climate change, among others. The 17th goal on multi-stakeholder partnerships, or as we refer to them in this book, multi-stakeholder collaborations, begs us to ask the following question. How do we shift or transform our socio-ecological systems to serve the goals of justice, sustainability, and peace, and foster aliveness for all people in the community of life? This book is an attempt to provide some answers to that question. Based on a great deal of research and many years of practice in implementing change processes within projects and collaboration systems, this practitioner's guide offers a comprehensive approach to stewarding systems transformation through multi-stakeholder collaborations for the achievement of sustainable development. Now, just to run through the agenda for the event today, bear with me for a second. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So, after my welcome words, we're going to have some welcome words from Rebecca Marsh, who's the senior editor of Routledge, our publisher. Then Dr. Petra Kuenkel will be delivering a keynote address. And then following her keynote address, we're going to split into 3 breakout groups, which are going to be led by the other 3 authors, myself, Dominic, and Elizabeth, who will focus on a different part of the book along with 1 or more practitioners from a related case or area of work. So without further ado, I would like to stop sharing my screen and welcome Rebecca Marsh from our publishing company, Routledge, to offer us a few words of welcome. Rebecca, welcome. The floor is yours. Rebecca, you have to unmute yourself. There you go. Okay.
Thank you for that. That's great. Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to see such an amazing group of people. It's great to be celebrating the launch of what I really consider to be a groundbreaking book. So just to give you a little bit of background to me, for many years, my interests and indeed my portfolio as a publisher have focused on sustainability issues and on responsible business. And so with the advent of the Sustainable Development Goals, I guess the world had a much clearer vision for what a thriving planet should look like. However, the realisation of the SDGs does require bringing about change on the ground too, and scaling capacity for multi-stakeholder collaboration and partnership among committed practitioners and decision makers. And I think this is absolutely where the book Leading Transformative Change Collectively really does do that. What I find particularly impressive about the book is that it is action orientated. So it takes the reader through the different steps of leading and building a global movement that does positively impact multi-stakeholder sustainability initiatives, improves governance, enhances democracy, invigorates education, and shifts companies to be of service for the future of humankind. And so for these reasons, the book can be seen as both emergent and having genuine impact in practice as well as research. And I think that is what really sets it apart from other titles. And of course, its open access status contributes to this very important goal. And in particular, this will be helpful in parts of the world where, you know, the cost of books can be prohibitive. And so it opens the discussion to a much broader group of practitioners and students who may not have been able to access it otherwise. And I think from that perspective, it's a truly groundbreaking title. And I would just like to say that from meeting Dominic and his lovely family on a very hot day in Boston back in 2019, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with the full author team. And I truly thank them for their great professionalism. And obviously very pleased to be involved in this discussion about the wider themes of the book in the workshop today.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Rebecca. We're really very grateful to have had the opportunity to work with you and Routledge on this book, and very thankful for your support and belief in the importance of this book. That's meant a lot to us over the past couple of years as we've put it together. I was actually looking in my emails today, and it was almost exactly a year ago today that we submitted you the final version of this book. And we spent a great deal of time in 2019 really working on it. So it's been a couple of years process for us to have written this book, and it's been a really wonderful journey. And thank you very much, Rebecca, for your support over that period of time for making this possible. Now I'd like to shift gears, and I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Petra Kuenkel. She is the founder of the Collective Leadership Institute and a full member of the Club of Rome. Dr. Kuenkel is a visionary thinker and a cutting-edge researcher whose work in transformation processes and research into the practice of collective leadership have provided the basis for the majority of this book. It's been my pleasure to be her partner at the Collective Leadership Institute for the past 5 years, and an honor to have co-authored this book with her. Petra, the floor is yours for your keynote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Douglas. And thank you to everybody and all the people. Some of them I know, but I know they are all somehow connected in one way or another to the Collective Leadership Institute. And yes, I remember that about 10 years ago, I said something, or even I wrote something in an article, and that was a sentence similar to: transformative change is not the task of a few enlightened people, but it is actually the task of everybody. It's everybody's business. And I think now in the year 2021, in some areas after a pandemic, but in most areas still in a pandemic, I think we are even much closer to everybody understanding that we need to take care of our planet, and we need to take care of each other, and we need to take care of our economic system that may not 100% continue the way we have been dealing with that in the past. And these are enormous shifts that we need to go about. But as Rebecca said, and also Douglas mentioned, it is not something that we can only hope to be taking place on the political level, or even on the UN level, or even on the kind of the level of the powerful nations. So we cannot actually wait for a top-down approach. We have to actually go about the change. And as a matter of fact, and you're all involved in change endeavors, it is happening. And I always say in some of the keynotes that I'm holding in other places, that we tend to overlook what is the change that is already taking place on the ground. Because if you are, I am a member of the Club of Rome, so if you have a lot to do with people who think globally and act globally and always are in these days in Zoom meetings, with globally thinking people, then I really appreciate their drive. But I am very often the one who says, wait a minute, we need to put the gumboots on, and the actual change is going to happen on the ground. Or even if we don't say on the ground, but it's going to happen on the different levels of administration, municipalities, in business, in governments, in local communities, in civil society organizations. And I always say we need to look at what do people actually do, and what if you, let's say, if you imagined you counted everybody together in the world who's working on transformative change, even if these are grassroots projects, or even if these are kind of paper policy influencing strategies, or even if these are business sustainability strategies, etc. If we counted all of them together, I think it would be a wonderful picture. And so I believe that this is a key issue, to say, how can we become just this little bit better in leading transformative change collectively? How can we understand what collaboration is, and how collaboration becomes more successful? And particularly, what are the ecosystems of people, that can work together in a different way? So this is what this book is about. And I'm just going to go through a little what the book is. And looking at what is really special about this book. And I thought it's quite interesting because, in my view, and Douglas has said this, it's a long-standing work that is behind the book, and there's a lot of practice work. And many of you here on this call are actually contributed to the book, and you may not even know this. So there is a huge acknowledgement and thank you of the practice that actually takes place, that we could learn from and then consolidate it. So it is the story of successful transformation initiative, in which the quality of collaboration and the process behind that quality actually made the difference. It is interesting enough also the kind of amalgamation of theory and practice, because it captures really a number of years in transformative change projects, and also the theory of how transformative change can be successful. And in a way, this led to a kind of almost, you can say, stress testing of a methodological approach around the collective leadership compass and the dialogic change model that is really doable and understandable in practice, but it is at the same time anchored in theory, and it is anchored in a systems aliveness theory. Douglas, you mentioned this already and said what is so extremely important, and this is a bit of a shift in view, because very often we think the sustainable development goals are more kind of technical issues, and often they are, or administrative issues. But actually, it is really about shifting the underlying system, and it is about shifting the behavior that we are all so used to in sustaining the unsustainable system, and looking at how do we foster life protecting and thriving systems. And the interesting thing is that what we found out in the 15 years of really supporting transformative change is that there is this very strong connection between the thriving individual and the potential, the thriving interaction systems of people collaborating, and the processes they work that kind of need to model how the future should look like. And that is a way of talking about systems aliveness, and that is a core part of the book. So we do talk in the book definitely about the individual well-being, we talk about the self, we talk about an understanding of what aliveness, what thrivability means for us, what vitality means for us. We talk about the collective well-being and how the relationality between us and others, and us and institutions institutions among themselves, is actually contributing to regenerating and safeguarding conditions for the well-being. And we talk about how to actually consciously and more consciously go about this transformative change collectively, so that we enliven systems. So this book is really about practice. It is, it's almost, I would say, Rebecca, you're right, it's a guidebook. You know, it's really about, you know, for decision makers, for practitioners, for change makers. It is about how to do things, how to use the systems aliveness approach for collaboration, and how to make it palpable, how to make it doable, how to actually do the change together with other people in a step-by-step approach. And some of the breakout sessions, I suppose, will look at, you know, what it means, you know, how a system looks like before and after. And it is really a guidebook for the practice of multi-stakeholder collaboration, because multi-stakeholder collaboration is the future. We're only going to be able to deal with the challenges of sustainability and the challenges even that we have in the pandemic now, and with our economic system, if we work in multi-stakeholder collaboration, and if we work with a certain quality and the quality of process in multi-stakeholder collaboration. So Rebecca said it's an open access book, and it is even accompanied by an open free online tool, where there are at least 2 levels already available: collaborative change maker and collaboration system. And we are still working on the transformation network that is about really big systems change. So that is the background of what is it about. At what is actually the structure of the book? Why do we call it a really practitioner guide? So chapter 1 is, I think, the most part where theory comes in, although theory is short because there have been other books, you know, written on the theory that you can also have a look at. But this is really getting the gist out of the theory and introducing the concept of systems aliveness and how it could guide us into a different future. It is about the collective leadership compass, understanding it and what it means at the different levels of change, and how to use it in a very, very practical way in teams and organizations, in multi-stakeholder collaboration, in societies, even in large systems change. Chapter 2 is now really about you know, getting things, getting active, getting going. And the core of chapter 2 is the dialogue to change model that we have developed, that actually shows how collaborative change takes place in 4 different distinct phases. Phases are never 100% distinct, but distinct enough to understand how to apply the collective leadership compass in a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, because we often need to prepare people for a collaboration. And that is a big mistake that often takes place, that we think collaboration is an easy thing and it just works, and it often doesn't. So we need to prepare people for a collaboration in phase 1, and then we can go to a more kind of consolidated collaboration in phase 2, and finally implement in phase 3. So this chapter is all about really the doing and making sure that this becomes successful. Chapter 3 is almost like the backstage of that clear 4-phase process, you know, with applying the compass. And it takes a little bit more a reflective approach in looking at what's the role of dialogic process facilitators, and what's the role of dialogue, and why is the dialogic approach so extremely important. This chapter is full of reflective tools, but also tools for kind of conducting meetings in a different way, that they become more alive, more co-creative, etc. So there are lots of kind of tools and methods and details and diagrams, etc. And chapter 4 is really then saying, okay, great, you know, we understood the aliveness approach, wonderful. We know the dialogic change model. We know how to design the process in kind of basically, we know, what needs to be done backstage in terms of dialogic process facilitators. And chapter 4 is now really about becoming transformative. And what is so important is really understanding what collaboration ecosystems are, and particularly how to move from the typical kind of fight or leave strategy that so often takes place in collaboration into a really good functional collaboration ecosystem. And the focus of this chapter is really how to do process architectures, how to develop theories of change that all actors can own, and how to develop process architectures that work into the future. And chapter 5 is now most importantly about becoming reflective. It looks at different tools and methods, how to stop and review and look at how the collaborative process is actually taking place. And it is full of, I would say, sounds maybe a bit strange, assessments. So assessing the quality of a collaborative change process. And we will have different assessments on the individual level, on the team level, on the systems level, etc. So it is really looking at what makes the collaboration successful, so that we can do this assessments on a regular base, and then adjust our strategy and not become worked up about an assessment that may be not great, because this is not the issue. It is about gaining ideas in a conversation with other people, how to actually find entry points for an improvement of the quality of the collaboration process. So that is basically the book. And I thought I wanted to end with a beautiful quote that somebody just recently said from, I think, from Indonesia. And what she says is, oh, this is a great approach, because when you work in a system and you have the feeling, this isn't really ready, and people aren't ready, for the big shift that needs to take place. And I don't know about you, but we are often working in systems where you have the feeling, the system isn't really ready for change. And she said, yeah, you use the system aliveness approach with a collective leadership compass, and then you can also use the dialogic change model integrated, because this is a promising pathway to almost knit systems aliveness into the interaction processes, into the change processes, and that becomes almost contagious. It takes on a meaning of itself, and then people take it up, and that is really a push into the systems, or the transformative systems change we need. Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for taking this in the basic ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petra, for introducing the book to us in such a succinct, comprehensive way, and also mentioning a lot of those important terms, which I think will come up in the different breakout groups. I think, as you see from the cover of the book, there's this nice collective leadership compass flower, which is at the stage of blossoming, and you use the word aliveness a lot, which I think is a term which is maybe not known to everybody, but hopefully everybody can understand that term, aliveness. And I think that that's a really important part of our work together, and of the work of collective leadership is how can we bring this kind of aliveness to our collaboration systems. And this is as I said, one way this book really tries to answer that question, and answer that question that we're all who are working in development or in trying to make the world a better place. How can we bring this sense of aliveness, this feeling of aliveness, or systems aliveness, to the collaborations in which we're working? So thank you very much for that introduction, and thanks as well again to Rebecca. So we're going to shift now to sort of breakout groups. And as Dr. Kuenkel said, the first chapter of the book is a bit more theoretical and focuses on these sort of what multi-stakeholder collaborations are all about, what the framework for multi-stakeholder collaborations is, why it's important, why we need to be working in multi-stakeholder collaborations. There's also an introduction to this concept of aliveness, and also an introduction to the collective leadership compass. Now, the compass is really I wouldn't say it's cross-cutting, it's an omnipresent tool for collective leadership practice. We use it throughout, and the rest of the book is really uses the collective leadership compass and this systems aliveness approach in all of the work that Petra mentioned in the other several chapters. So in the different breakout groups, the first breakout group, and I'm going to share my screen again. Hopefully you can see it. In the different breakout groups, in the first breakout group, I will be leading that breakout group on talking about the use of the dialogic change model, as Petra mentioned, in how to build collaboration ecosystems. And I will be talking about a case that I worked on called the Partnership for Sustainable Orange Juice. And my work colleague from the Christian Romero Initiative will be joining me to talk about that. In the second session, Dominic is going to be focusing on chapters 3 and 4, and he has, I think, 3 colleagues with him from Egypt, and they are 2 from Egypt and 1 from Germany, but who worked with him in Egypt, who are going to be discussing the role of process facilitators in enlivening these collaboration ecosystems through a long collaboration on the Egyptian dual system of technical education. And then in the third breakout session, my partner and colleague Elizabeth Kuhn is going to be talking about transformative change processes for good governance over a long period of time in which she has worked in youth-led initiatives in Tunisia. And we'll be focusing more on the 5th chapter on these reflective assessments. And that is basically the long and short of it. So anyway, as participants today, you have the opportunity to join any of these 3 sessions. You can come and talk with me about the dialogic change model and sustainable orange juice between Brazil and Germany. You can talk to Dominic and his colleagues, and Lulek was there as well. I see Lulek was also an integral part of that project in Egypt. She will be in that session to talk about the Egyptian dual system. And Elizabeth has some colleagues of hers as well from Tunisia, and they will be talking about youth-led initiatives in Tunisia. So if you see at the bottom of your screen, you should have an option now to join the different breakout groups. My session was great, but I would actually prefer to go to a different session. And now that we're back together in plenary, and you've all had a chance to hear about different content in the book, we have the opportunity now to share a little bit. And I think that I would really like to give the opportunity to group number 2, because this is the largest group, and I think that there's probably many of you would like to have the opportunity to speak. The group number 2 was Dominic's group, and he had several guests with him, including Mohammed, including, I believe, Sanya was in the room, and Mahmoud. Was Mahmoud with you as well?
Mahmoud Diab, yes.
Mahmoud Diab, excellent to see you fellows, and Sanya again. But I would really like to give you the floor. I believe Lulekwa, who is my Collective Leadership Institute colleague, will be making a brief presentation on the conversation there. So I would like to give the floor to this group to talk a little bit about your presentation, your conversation, and if there are any insights about chapters 3 and 4 from your breakout group. Lulekwa, I give you the floor.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. So I'm going to share some highlights from the conversation from our group. But I also do invite the speakers to also share, because I think I actually wrote quite a lot, so I do not need to show all of what I've written. So one of the highlights for me, which also rings true as someone who works with the Collective Leadership Institute, is that at the beginning of this multi-stakeholder collaboration, really opening the lines of communication and really accepting that the conversation needs to be started. So this was shared by one of the speakers, that it was one of the things also maybe that made room or opened the door for the public sector to come together with the private sector. And another insight also, which we always encourage also our partners, was that, the exercise of the core team, looking closely at the entire Egyptian dual system stakeholder landscape. So who is there? How do they work? Which governorates are they servicing? What are the challenges? Where are the gaps? So they really said that this was important, not only understanding, but really also bringing those stakeholders into a conversation. And also, I think this was also shared idea that it also at that point, it is really important to be decisive and really look at, which stakeholder to bring and at which phase of your process. So we went a little bit further and look at the result of that whole engagement process, which was, of course, the structure where we see the central technical amana, also where we see the level of the governorate's technical amanas. And I think what I can share, especially on this point, was that as much as it is important to have such structures, but also it is important to be patient, because usually that is when we rush, that initial phase. And perhaps this is where we might lose key people, and also maybe that might have these unintended consequences where the credibility of such an initiative is now shaken. So being patient, this was said. But also the other one where, collaboration is not always beautiful. So sometimes it is complex. So by really always opening that room to have these conversations, then it's also important to unearth, maybe surface the questions that might arise. And some of those questions also might lead us maybe to a more collaborative approach once all of those underlying issues are addressed. So I will quote one of the speakers in my last two sentences, where it was said that looking at the work that was done after all, or rather after the 2 years, then they realized that perhaps maybe they had underestimated the amount of effort that needed to be put into this. However, the beauty was that as soon as everyone met, as equals, then there was that magic. And this is the quote, the magic of bringing people together, really creating an environment and enabling partners to really meet and work together. So the result of that as well, if I use our language, would be that that's what we mean by bringing aliveness into a system. We ran out of time, and we had two brilliant questions. I don't know if we will have time to look at them, but I'm going to try my luck and just throw them into this universe that is all the people that are here. So the two questions that I noted was a further explanation or sharing on how the engagement process of the public sector was, how it took place, maybe what were those initial first steps. And then the second one as well, which I think it is a good question, especially now that we are being forced by the pandemic to work, in a different way. And that question was along the lines of how best to bring innovation into a dual system where the coming together of private sector and public sector is great. But then how do you continuously bring innovation into the dual system, as perhaps sometimes maybe it might be a little bit conservative. And I believe my time is up, Douglas.
Thanks, Lalequa. I would say if I would invite others from your group to make any further commentary, and thank you for that presentation. Maybe just to relate it back to the material in the book a little bit. Maybe Dominic could expand a little bit, or offer it back to Mohammed, Mahmoud, or Sanya to talk a little bit about how the dialogic facilitation process really contributed, and how that relates to the book.
Yes, Douglas. If you just give me a few seconds, I need to have a core message from our journey during the last 2 years with your team. If you need to have a live ecosystem, you must first build a trust between the stakeholders. This was a core thing that we have. We just have this trust between others, and also this will give you a lot of love and laugh during the work. We have this with us, and I remember that during all our works and our meetings, it's feel like that it's not a working meeting. It's maybe some informal meetings, or that we are not have the stress of meeting. We are trusted that we can do it, and we are now one team, and we can discussing this in a relaxed way. We can find solution, and this was not the case in the start of our work. And this is why my colleague Mr. Khashab say you must be patient. I remember that during the first meetings, maybe the first, second or third meeting, we always have a lot of stress, and I have a lot of sometimes high and rise sounds. But after that, we bring this trust, we bring this liveness, and we start to have a lot of love and love during our meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sajab, and all of you. May I add something, or a little bit something? My advice also for all of us: don't let anyone drive you away from your object. Or goal, because sometimes when we just started our dialogue, because we have a lot of different stakeholders, so not all of them in the same level of understanding of our system, or even showing his commitment to our goals. So with patience and with some cleverness, just you can let them coming with you in your way, and don't let the others take you away from your goals. This is a very important issue, because we and also make it easily as you can. Don't make it hard or difficult, because for communication with people, it's to make it easy, to make it with fun, with laughing. It's easier to understand it, and let them go with you, all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Hasheb. Dominic, would you like to add a couple of comments and relate it back to the book?
Yeah, I can do that. And what might be useful for those listening, so Diab is advisor to the Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Education and Technical Education in Egypt. So speaking from a public sector perspective, Khasheb is Director General at the National Center for Human Resources Development and the Egyptian Federation of Investors Association, so the private sector focus. Sanya at the time was an advisor with GIZ's enhancement of the Egyptian dual system program. And the very reason I invited them into conversation is because they are dialogic process facilitators. So this was very much trying to give them the floor so that they could offer insights on their process of leading collectively with both mind and heart. You know, I think what they're talking about in terms of love and in terms of humor, in terms of laughter, these human dimensions of change are really quite important. Yes, we need our analytical mind to analyze and to assess and to rationalize our way through parts of the process, but we definitely need our emotive heart in terms of what we care about. Who are we working with? What is the shared vision that we're trying to achieve? So I appreciate that emphasis very much from our dialogic process facilitators. They bring aliveness, they bring laughter, these successes that could be celebrated along the way was another thing they talked about, how to keep energy and momentum in a system. But they really modeled, whether they were informal or in informal leadership roles, these are all collective leaders. And there are many more. Some of them don't speak English, so I couldn't bring them into this conversation. But I'm just grateful for the time they took today. And check out chapter 3. You'll see them reflected there.
Thanks, Dominic, and thanks, Mr. Hasheb, and also Mr. Diab for joining us. Yeah, this whole project was very inspirational, and I think that to use some of Petra's words, you've left some fractals of aliveness in the system with these collective leadership facilitators. They now know what it's like to feel an alive system and how to facilitate that aliveness through dialogue. That is really bringing, really the goal of Collective Leadership Institute is to leave that capacity in the system. I'd like to give the floor now to the third group, which is Elizabeth's group, who will be talking about youth work in, or bringing youth collective leadership in Tunisia. So Elizabeth, I'll give you the floor, or give the floor to whoever it is from your group who's going to present a little bit about your insights.
Okay, thank you very much, Douglas. So it's a short jump from Egypt to Tunisia. I had the great pleasure to be joined by collective leadership facilitator Sumaya Khalfebi. She is from the youth organization We Love Kairouan in Kairouan, which is central Tunisia. And she joined me from one of the teams, from the team from We Love Kairouan, from one of the projects in which we have been working together since 2017, so quite a while, with regards to sustainable urban development in this city. So it's quite a local project and very, very much anchored in also grassroots perspective in really shifting things in the center of the country after the revolution with regard to truly good governance processes on the ground. And that meant really bringing together administration, private sector, and citizens together in an atmosphere. And here I'm really joining the colleagues from Egypt, an atmosphere that was very much characterized by mutual distrust, by not a shared understanding of what does it mean, co-creation, and what does it mean, how do the SDGs relate to us in the local municipality in, Kairouan city center. And we talked a little bit about how the process of really setting up a sustainable dialogue platform for urban development, for sustainable urban development in this city and in this region was done with the approach at the heart of the book, most particular with the collaboration catalysts. That's what we call the success factors for really setting up a successful multi-stakeholder collaboration, what we needed to do in this case, but also checking these success factors in a structured and also regular way, so that we could be sure we are on the right track, we're not leaving anyone behind, and we're making sure that there is at each step of the process really this atmosphere of aliveness and this atmosphere of people leading together and delivering also together the impact that we wanted to see. And I think one of the, as I mentioned, one of the key challenges was really lack of trust. People were not, very much interested in joining this initiatives. The administration was like, okay, yeah, okay, let's consult youth voices, but working with them together, like, no, this is our development of the city, this is our task, and this is what should also stay with our task. So we had trust issues, we had generational issues, and at the heart of it, obviously, a youth organization that really tried to establish itself as facilitators for having sustainable change, so sustainable urban development happening in their city. And what we focused on and what Sumaya also shared from that story was very much that key challenges were, aside from the engagement, also getting people in an innovation and into a creative mindset. So how to set up that framework of really supporting people to have the courage to try things out differently. And she shared very much also, we shared our story together about how we set up a process in a way that pushed people a little bit outside of their comfort zone, but obviously not too much that they would drop out. We established kind of a reputation of, oh, these We Love Chiron and CLI workshops, they're always doing things completely differently. You know, there's always a surprise element. They're always like weird games that they're doing, and everyone needs to stand in a circle, these kind of things. And this is essentially how, over a process of a couple of months with extreme, perseverance and dedication, we engaged about 50, 60 different stakeholders for really making a sustainable development plan for the city, developing full technical plans for it, getting endorsement by the local administration, working together to apply for public funding, getting recognition by the National Minister for Culture for the work that is going on this very local level. And just to bring it back a little bit also to the context of the chapter that we've been doing. So we use these success factors as a process design element, but also throughout as Petra mentioned it, the slightly strange assessment tools. So as an assessment tool to really check, are we on track? Have we kept all the factors inside that we really need, that something sustainable comes out at the end? So we use these success factors also for a regular assessment of process quality, and really focused on establishing this reflective learning culture, and always looking together at these particular elements that we need to shift, where we have strength, how can we be creative in using them, and what exactly do they mean in a very local context in central Tunisia.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Is there anyone else from your group with you today that wants to talk about some insights?
I would like to ask Sumaya, who was with me, of course, from We Love Chiron, if you'd like to add anything.
Sumaya?
Actually, yeah, thank you. Actually, thank you, Elizabeth, for wrapping up like everything. I just want to say something like, if someone came to me in 2017 and tell me I'm from the future and you will have a lot of stakeholders from different sectors and they will do a lot of stuffs, I will not believe it. So it was, as I said, it was like it was a long period, it was 4 years, but it was really, really worth it. And when I see now, like the humanity and the engagement between all the stakeholders, that that they are together and they are coming, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of sectors are together, and even we create some relations between private sector and administration and citizens. What I can say, even I'm even prouder of what we did. With, of course, with the partnership of Collective Leadership Institute, of course, also with the sponsoring of IFA, etc. It was like really a proud job that we did. So yeah.
Thanks, Sumaya. Are there any other insights or questions related back to the book from this group? That we could go before we move on to the last group? Elizabeth? No? Okay. Then I guess I will just continue to talk, because you haven't heard enough of me today, about the third group, or actually the first group number 1, which was related to chapter number 2, which was really about the dialogic change model. And in this group, I had with me Sandra Dush Silva, who was from the Christian Initiative Romero. And over 3 years, Sandra and I worked on building up the stakeholder system using the dialogic change model for sustainable orange juice supply chain, specifically for helping to create a living wage for workers in the orange juice supply chain in Brazil. This was a German-Brazilian international global partnership, quite complex. And it really required putting together 2 stakeholder systems, one in Brazil and one in Germany. And in Germany was where we really started to focus first in this case. Interestingly, as I related, the Dialogic Change Model and Collective Leadership Institute didn't really wasn't consulted in the design of the project that Sandra's organization wrote. And so Sandra and her organization created an event right at the beginning of the project, which was really something for a much later phase related to the dialogic change model. And if the project had been designed using the dialogic change model, it would have been designed quite differently. In any case, we had a sort of phase 2 event at the beginning of the project work with Sandra working for the orange juice supply chain, and it was kind of a disaster. And we kind of got kicked right out of phase 2, and it was really a sign, okay, we can't be in phase 2. We need to go back to phase 1 and really start a proper process to really build a core team, to establish trust and understand our context. I think what's interesting about all 3 presentations that we're hearing is so much is reliant on humanity. And the humanity factor and really building trust up in these stakeholder systems is vital. And I think that's really a part, an integral part of the work that we do at Collective Leadership, is we bring a lot of heart to our work. And I think that came through very clearly. What I think is interesting from having used the dialogic change model and really explored the dialogic change model and how we apply it as it's applied in chapter 2, and you can read it, in the project with Sandra, is that it really informed us how we needed to go to build our stakeholder system. I'd like to actually pass it to Sandra for a moment, just so she could talk a little bit about how she experienced building up and stewarding the dialogue process and how that was informed by the dialogic change model. Sandra?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can underline how important it was to kind of get through the dialogic change model and use it as an important tool. It helped us to kind of build up the Partnership for Sustainable Orange Juice, which was launched last year, end of 2020. And yeah, we had a start where we were not able to kind of create a system for change, but then to look at this model and go one step back and realize, okay, we are in the phase 1, and we need to build trust, and we need to focus on a container and build a good and stable container, and then we can go to the next step. That was really important, and like big thanks to Collective Leadership Institute, which helped us to kind of, and especially Douglas, to kind of get us through this step-by-step approach, because otherwise I don't think we achieved the goal that we wanted to achieve, a stable system, which we have right now, like focusing on the container at the first step, and then on the second step, kind of building trust with the container, and now we have like a stable system. And the others, which were against our system at the beginning, they are now coming back because it has attraction. So it was like, yes, it was a really important. It was a really important model for us, and it worked. So it was also a surprise.
Thanks. Thanks, Sandra. Yeah, I think it's important to state that, you know, the dialogic change model, which is the focus of chapter 2, it really allows us to think about how we can systematically build a stakeholder system. And what's also nice about the dialogic change model is that it's an iterative tool or a process. And although, you know, Sandra's project started with a kind of a disaster by moving quite much too prematurely into the second phase and putting stakeholders together in a room when they really were not ready to be in a room together. It still allowed us, the dialogic change model said, oh, well, we messed it up, that's the end of it. No, we were able to then rebuild from the bottom up using the dialogic change model, which informed us to really rebuild the stakeholder system in a way which allowed for us to move from, you know, within a relatively short period of time for such a complex system into technically we're in an implementation in a phase 3 right now. The Partnership for Sustainable Orange Juice has launched. It launched in December as part of the German Sustainability Week. This is a tremendous achievement, and really Sandra and the Christian Initiative Romero did a tremendous amount of heavy lifting in order to make it happen. Of course, CLI and the dialogic change model can take some credit for having helped to steward this dialogue process. But I think, you know, Sandra, congratulations, of course, to you. And of course, congratulations to, you know, to the We Love Kairouan group for doing the phenomenal work that you've been doing in Tunisia, as well as for the members of the Egyptian dual system who are in the room together too. What I think is really interesting about these 3 different stories is that they're at totally different levels. We see that in Kairouan, in Tunisia, we're very much at a local level, and the collective leadership tools function extremely well at that local level. In Egypt, we're really dealing with a national level initiative. This initiative was with Mohammed and Mahmoud, who are on the call, are really at a top central government level. The Central Technical Amana, which is based in Cairo, is overseeing this process, but from a centralized national level. And that whole process has actually been, you know, has moved out into many of the different provinces. And the process that Sandra and I worked on, we were working on a transnational, transatlantic process, which was between the national government of Germany and then stakeholders at very high level private sector stakeholders and civil society stakeholders, both in Germany and in Brazil. But the collective leadership approach works for all 3 of these different approaches in different ways, and of course tailored in different means, but all very functional. So I want to thank everybody for having participated in these discussions, as well as for the present back. Now, we don't have too much time left, only about 15 minutes before we have to check out. So I want to open up the floor to any questions or concerns, insights. I would prefer if you wrote in the chat your questions. And I've got some assistants so that I get some filters for my questions, so I'm not going to get inundated. So if you do have questions or insights, please take a moment, write them in the chat. Some have already come through on another channel that I'm using, and I'm monitoring, but please take a moment, write up your questions. It's great to see so many familiar faces here. Tristan, I see you. Raina Mata, it's great to see your face after so many years. So please write up your questions, if you have some, in the chat box, to any of our practitioners from all over the world who are joining us today. I know that in my group, I had a couple of very interesting questions, and just sort of about how to use some of our tools. And I think that just in general, if you have the opportunity to either purchase or download the book, please do so. We really encourage the wide use of this book and collective leadership methodologies. The book is as Petra mentioned, and also Rebecca mentioned, this is an open source book. It's really important for Collective Leadership Institute that transformation gets scaled up massively. Of course, this book is one of many stepping stones and tools, but of course, if you or your colleagues are going into processes for change or transformation, we highly encourage you to share this book with them. Transformation is sweeping up upon us and is incredibly needed at the moment. So we definitely encourage you to download the book or to purchase it if you have the means. So I believe Martin has shared the link on many occasions in the chat, but of course he will share it again. And I see Lulekwa has put in. Lulekwa, why don't you come in and talk a little bit? If I can invite you again, go ahead and tell us a little bit your insight.
I would actually like, Dr. Diab and or with Sanya to say a little bit about Education 2.0, which Egypt is currently embarking on, which is part also, of the transformation process of education, but also the technical education. So, Dr. Diab, Mike is with you. With a cup of tea and a plate of kunafa.
Thank you, Lekra, and it's nice to meet you all again virtually. I think that we have with Corona used to meet virtual with all our who love. I think that yes, now in Egypt we have a great transformation, which is the Egyptian education 2.0, which is a new system with a lot of pillars to be done. But in technical education also we have our transformation, technical education 2.0, and this technical education we have 5 pillars to transform the education from the phase he is on it to another phase, which is somehow with higher quality, with a world quality measures. We have the first pillar for the curriculum transformation. The second one, to build a body, independent body for the quality change. And I think the third one is the major one for the whole system, is to include the private sector. We need to include more the private sector to the education, to the technical education. And also here we have somehow built the same phenomena for the technical amana. I think now we have a new project which is a center of competence, and I think that Sanya know more of this center of competence. And this center of competence is somehow a private, public-private partnership in the management and also in building the curriculum. So I think it's somehow refer to our work, and to have a platform and supervisors and advisors forms to manage this center of competence. Also, we have another pillar for the social image for technical education, because we need to have a good students as an input for the technical education systems that will help us to have this. So we have a lot to do this. So it's how to build a new image and a new system for technical education, which is technical education 2.0. And I think this is aligned also with Egyptian Vision 2030, which is put a lot on the development of technical education on the work-based systems that have the private sector with us. Thanks, Liko.
Thanks, Mahmoud.
Thank you.
I'd like to field a couple of questions from the chat. I don't think I have the time to answer them very fully, but I see that my very cool intellectual dad has asked a very cool question about what techniques do you use to bring stakeholders together who have conflicting interests? There are numerous techniques. Of course, if we perceive that that stakeholders have different interests, of course we engage with them bilaterally before bringing them together. We have to make sure that they're actually willing to engage in a dialogue before we actually bring them together. And helping people to see larger pictures and common interests, win-win situations, those are all sort of part of the dialogic techniques that we use. But of course, sometimes we do run into the situation where stakeholders really are in opposition. And when that occurs, usually they're not prepared to enter into a dialogue together. But there are, of course, ways of working with stakeholders over periods of time where you can bring them to a phase where they may begin to dialogue with each other. And I know that my colleagues could talk about this for forever and ever, but I don't know if any of my co-authors want to pop in to answer that question about conflicting parties or conflicting interests. Do any of you want to jump in? I open the floor to Elizabeth, Dominic, or Petra.
Just a quick remark on this. I think, Douglas, you hit the point already by saying we engage bilaterally. If you know the conflicting interests, and there's usually some kind of initiator, could it be a government organization or an NGO or a local organization or a community organization or even a business. So you usually have some kind of initiator. And the important point on context analysis step 2 in phase 1 is always to understand the system. So the first is really to have conversations, usually hopefully inspiring conversations, so that this goes beyond feasibility studies, it's not just extracting information from people, but having conversations with people and understanding the system and understanding what the conflicts are. And then everything else, all the other steps in terms of engaging the system, of course, are dependent on how the conflict looks like. I think we have been involved in a water project in, Elizabeth, you have been involved in that, where it was in Tunisia and people were really fighting with each other. I mean, it was dangerous, between government officials and farmers. So it took about almost 9 months to have separate conversations with both big actors, the farmers and the government officials, before it was possible to get them in a joint conversation. So a lot of trust had to be built among these different stakeholder groups in order to be able to bring them into one room. And Sandra, you probably also understand what we're talking about, because sometimes you need to get subsystems into a conversation with each other before you can get the different subsystems into a conversation, particularly if there are conflicts.
Thanks, Petra. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question that we run up against. So thanks for that question. I do see another question from Tristan asking, do you think there is a minimum time regarding the project duration to actually use the dialogic change model meaningfully? The short answer is no. I think that the dialogic change model can really be meaningful to use on almost any kind of a project. Of course, if the project is, an IKEA furniture, a project where you just need to sort of follow instructions, you don't need the dialogic change model. But of course, if you're working with multiple stakeholders and you need to bring them together into a field of collaboration, the DCM can function for almost any duration of project. I hope that helps to answer your question. Let me see if there's some other good questions here. I see there's lots of comments.
Douglas, while you're looking for the next question, I just wanted to reflect on the conflicting stakeholder question as well. I know sometimes I'm at fault of almost being too future oriented when I'm trying to support change in a given system. And sometimes there are moments where we need to suspend that. And like Petra was saying, fully understand the system that we're intervening in. And understand often that, not for all of us, but often we're coming from the quote unquote outside, understanding the past before we can really articulate shared goals and move forward together. And for me, that's the difference between advocating for something, advocating for a change, and taking more of an inquiry kind of attitude where I'm not seeking to be understood when I enter in a system, but rather I'm seeking to understand. As a fundamentally different attitude that you can bring into your work with stakeholders. Because there's probably something to discover about that conflict that exists in the system and is probably very important for its future as well.
Thanks, Dominic. Yeah, I think that was part of Sandra's learning process through her work with the dialogic change model over the period of time that we worked together. Was that she went and her organization and position was very much an advocacy position and became much more inquiry based as the role of a steward of the dialogue became necessary. I just want to notice that we've come to the end of our time. And I want to thank everybody for being here and for sticking around, as well as for all the people who've participated in our projects and worked with us. It's really an honor to have had you with us today, and thank you very much for the project partners, Sumaya, Mahmoud, Mohammed, Sanya, and Sandra. You've all come and worked with us intimately over the last few years, and thank you very much for being a part of this event. Not only for the great work that you're doing and continuing to steward collective leadership, but also for coming to be with us for the celebratory moment. This is a great moment of celebration for CLI and for not only for the 4 co-authors, but also for our staff members who've been very supportive, who are also on the call with us today and have really been integral in implementing these projects with us and helping us to think through the work that we've done, as well as how we can best present it in this volume. I want to thank Rebecca Marsh from Routledge for being here together with us today, and for again having the faith and belief in the importance of this book. That was is really great, and thanks as well very much to my co-authors for having done this work over the last. Yeah, I mean, the writing process has been over 2 years for us coming to this point, but also this has been a long practice with the 4 of us over the last several years. Thank you very, very much for being a part of this. I hope that Martin has been posting the link to the book in the chat. I think he should do so again. So you can get the book, share it with your colleagues. We want everybody to read it and also to become a practitioner. Of course, if you feel you want to connect with us on a deeper level, please feel free. You can connect with us, write us an email at germany@collectiveleadership.com. And I think I will leave you with a question. And that question for everybody here is, how can you, as an individual, as a practitioner, as a teammate, as a citizen, how can you scale up the practice of transformative change? Take that with you, chew on it, sleep on it, put it under your pillow. Have a good night for all of you in European, Asian, and African time zones. Thank you so much for being a part of this today. And for the rest of us, it's lunchtime here in the United States, at least. I'm a hungry boy. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we really hope to connect with you in the future.
Thank you. It was amazing. Thank you.